As we end off this year, I was curious on what the message and inspiration would be. Should we talk about theoretical topics that can inspire the entrepreneur? After all, this show is for you. Should we do a recap of all the content into one show? Should you need a refresher? And as we look back on all the stats that we've achieved, I thought from a personal perspective, as an entrepreneur myself, I wanted to get a bit more personal on my own challenges, on my own approaches, and my thoughts. And for different reasons. I think it's to show the human side. We are all in different boats, but our boats travel in the same waters. So surely in different directions and definitely at different paces, still in the same waters. We have life outside of work. Teams that we want to inspire, we have God. Regardless of our relationship with Him, we have access to the same God. We have kids, or maybe soon you will have. And we have to balance multiple agendas, even if they are not ours, in order to fulfill this kind of like purpose of creating and solving. So, before we start, I want to share the success story of this podcast and our studio. This year, Not Yet Mature, together with XCAP, assisted 644 entrepreneurs in 20 countries. We assisted them in learning a new entrepreneurial soft skill, if you want to put it like that. Our message and vision reached nations. We never planned for it, but still being obedient in our calling. We never expected it. Stats don't lie. Okay, sometimes I do. Nevertheless, South Africa, United States, Wales, England, Poland, Ukraine, Australia, India, Namibia, Netherlands, Canada, Bangladesh, Russia, Singapore, Ireland, Argentina, Peru, Thailand, Hungary, and Palestine. It started with doing our part. Until we realized the true calling in reaching entrepreneurs, together with the divine calling God has on every entrepreneur's life. We were called to create, and from Not Yet Mature and from XCAP, we will respond to that curiosity. In 2026, we will continue the mission with a lot more responsibility. We are working with first-time founders, with entrepreneurs, but even more so, we are working into the nations. This success is not about us, but it highlights the importance that if you are willing, the outcome might be uncertain, but God uses that uncertainty for His glory. And that's the faith element. We saw that. And our plans might seem reasonable on paper, but in reality there is, and there should be, space for the unknown. The areas that require faith for God to use this as a vessel to inspire others, to reach others, and to encourage others. Why? We said it before, your business, especially to the entrepreneur, is very important for the kingdom. So thank you. Thank you for listening, for subscribing, for following, for asking, for doing whatever, not whatever you do, but for what you do. So here are my personal approaches, my feelings and reasoning in 2025. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you have mastered some and even in your own way, and even if it's completely in a different direction than me. This is me being not yet mature.
Welcome to yet another episode of Not Yet Mature, the podcast series talking about life and business, the mix between the two, and hopefully allowing the entrepreneur and founder to find some insights of what the path looks like, or rather, should look like ahead. XCAP has a vision that the ethical business that is formed around servitude and relational transactions should be given the advantage to exit the finite space and enter the infinite games. This, collectively, is our mission and our goal. Without further delay, let's dive into today's chat. Here with me, your host, founder of Exemplo Capital, Dion Richter. Like and subscribe. You know, the usual.
I basically segmented my thoughts and collective experiences and opinions from those experiences into the following categories. I went and categorized them into mentality, into approaches, into family, and God. And then I have a couple of practical tips or just point of views, I guess, that I would like to share. It's from my own challenges and battles with 2025. Hoping that in some way there is a nugget of inspiration. So the first point that I want to start is on the topic of mentality. Under that topic is, the first one is manifesting the phrase of I get to. If you know me personally or follow me on social media, you would have heard or seen this phrase quite a lot this year. And honestly, you will see much more of it in 2026 and beyond. It's one thing to say that I get to, but a total game changer in making this one of your life's mantras. Exactly why I said manifestation of I get to. Not saying it, but living it. It's actually much harder than you would think, right? Because applying this is, to the easy stuff becomes a way of simply just being modest. Like I can easily say, I get to travel. I get to go to sporting events. I get to have clients. I get to do this show. I get to buy things. You see, when applied to the basics, especially to the materialistic things, the phrase on its own loses its intended value. It's kind of like sarcastic or, I think just a way of being modest. It's almost seen like a condescending message of I get to and you don't. Arrogant, right? And as I said, it's just a mask to implement modesty in the obvious spoils. But I get to is not only that. It's to see life challenges, things that require your time and attention, especially the things that usually throw your day off, as moments of gratitude and moments entrusted to you. For me, unplanned time with the kids when I needed to work and they needed to be in school usually would be very stressful. It would be me trying everything in my power to get them at ease, occupied with anything else but me, so that on the sideline I can work, or at least just keep thinking about that. But the blessing comes in understanding that there is a huge difference in living by I have to, because these are my kids, I am their father, this is my responsibility, versus living in I get to do this. Just my truly falling back into the mindset and understanding of the I get to changes your approach. You want to be more involved, actively present, creative in creating memories. Sure, I get to sometimes means that other duties pile up. In these examples, it means that work will be later at night and sleep will be less. But when you live by I get to have these responsibilities, all of them, it really brings peace, and God really does come through with that, with the patience and energy you need. It's a positive mindset that echoes and snowballs. I get to serve and build relationships with my clients. I get to work on the proposals. I get to ensure that is a list of excellence, and ultimately I get to see how my work with them grows them into better, stronger, and more effective companies. Because I did not lack attention, and because I got to have pride in the way I serve them. I get to have the things I have, not because I'm the owner, but I get to be a steward of the things God entrusted to me. Regardless of the amount and size, God chose me to steward the resources and responsibilities that I have. From all of this, it might kind of like sound corny. I might just be just verbal affirmations without any weight, but try this in the mornings. When you wake up in the morning, start by saying, I get to steward what God sent me my way today. I get to work. I get to serve my clients in work. I get to exercise. I get to be challenged, and hopefully I get to witness the overcoming of each challenge. And why not end the day off by saying a bit more thanks to the things that you got to do today? And that includes everything. I get to, when implemented and lived by, will change the way how you see obstacles, and surely will change the way you seek solutions to them. But what's more, it will allow you to live in a space of gratitude over living in a fearful space of uncertainty and entitlement. The second mindset is the non-government mindset. This is going to seem attacking on certain people. I get that. It's going to seem attacking on their careers, but I'm talking about the stereotype, the general stereotype mindset. And this is from my own experience in 2025. This is the non-government mindset. And without detail or kind of like over-explanation, I do want to clarify a couple of things. There are great government institutions out there and amazing hardworking people in the great and also in the not so great government initiatives. Government is very important, and one should never forget that the gospel traveled on Rome's roads, meaning God uses even the government and especially them to do miracles and spread the gospel. This is why we submit under their authority, and why we pray for them, and why we do our part through taxes and submitting to their authority. So this is not an aim on anyone. This is talking about the greatest stereotype. The stereotype is work 8 to 4, entitled to every leave, entitled to every human right, refusal to serve, finding loopholes to not do what is not my work according to my contract, the mentality of putting myself first, doing things for my own pocket, and really be reckless with time management. If there is one thing I realized very soon in life, it is that self-centered approaches is not the way we were intended to serve. Work is important, regardless of where you work. And having a mindset of it's about me doing just enough to get by, regardless of how it affects others, is a place where relationships and servitude go to die. Having a non-government mindset, regardless of being in it or not in government positions, is about having a mindset that what I do impacts others. It's about understanding that if we are called to serve, often we need to be proactive. Often we need to bring light to dark areas. Often we need to be a team player. Often we need to put our contractual rights and privileges aside so that others can succeed. Co-workers, team members, and clients. It's about being very sensitive to others' time above my own. Not to be taking advantage of, but to understand that 9:10 is not the same as 9 o'clock. It's not in the area of 9. That's the government mentality, like 8:10, same thing. I've seen it in people. It's not the same. Getting things done eventually is not the same as getting things done to my best ability in the fastest time possible. A non-government mindset is about understanding that if non-communication or silos that are out of my control frustrates me, I should not let my team or clients suffer the same lack of communication. Be proactive with these things. Be the difference. You have every excuse to blame the system and culture around you, but the difference between the excuse in the change is ultimately how you personally approach things. The third mindset is the ability to say no, and especially to clients. The most difficult part of 2025 for me, apart from the move and new town with new challenges and new cultures, definitely was having to fire a client and having to say no to potential clients. We were taught this lie about the customer is always right and use that as a form of slavery to just chase one goal, and that's revenue or money. One of my biggest clients became very, very poisonous to our team culture. And it's easy to say, suck it up. They are paying the bills, but in reality, nothing can be done without an effective team. My responsibility as a leader is always my team first. Managing clients' expectations and serving into their perceived value is not the same as saying yes and amen to everything that they request. It's actually to say no when expectations cannot be met. Or yes, but when the demands negatively impact the team or my company. It's never an easy decision to make. Reality kicks in. What if they badmouth me, leave a bad review? What if I cannot meet deadlines or KPIs and targets without their business and their revenue? Only soon to realize that poisoned clients closes business avenues and not the opposite way around. You need to have the adult mindset of saying no when business damages your team culture and value system. It's not an easy decision. And the exit or departing of ways, I guess, are always very sensitive. But in our own, our other podcasts, we talked about the ability to have difficult conversations, right? And this is one of those moments. The not so fun part of being a leader or entrepreneur, the ability to have the difficult conversation of no. Having those three mindsets personally really made me balance each day more effectively. It eliminated background noise. It kept me accountable to focus on what mattered in the moment rather than what mattered according to general metrics. And those were the mindsets for 2025. And from those mindsets, a couple of personal approaches were born, which brings me obviously to category number 2. Talking about the approaches. And there's a couple of approaches that I want to mention. I think there's 3 approaches that I want to mention. Let's just make triple sure. Yeah. Let's tackle 3 approaches on my list here. So the first approach would be living surrendered and not taking control. This is me being vulnerable and open. Like, living surrendered is much more difficult than you could ever imagine. This is actually an approach that needs to be micromanaged from my point of view, constantly reminded and daily chosen. And to be honest, for an entrepreneur, for myself, this is very, very, very hard. So many times the solution or the hunt seems better when I'm in control. This year, I tested a new sales strategy. I've mentioned it a couple of places, a couple of times, and ultimately to see if I can close every single low-hanging fruit in 24 hours. I did. We exceeded 1 million in deals closed in 24 hours for consultancy. This method, designed by me, had success written all over it. I made reference to it before, and next year we are doing masterclasses on this. To be honest, it's massive. But I was so convicted, and I even said it now earlier on, about the structure simply because it included me more than God. And to be honest, the whole masterclass content was paused. Social media on this was paused, and campaigns paused on this because in reality, even in the opening of this example, it was centered around me. and taking the hunt onto my shoulders, actively not being surrendered. At the same time that I was developing the content and structure of this, I would break away and read scripture. I was highly convicted by Job's story. For me, Job's protection and the story in review, which by the way, he never knew. He didn't read the narrative or the story of his own life like we get to do. But for me, the story is not about only being faithful or being a believer. For me, the crux is it's about living surrendered. Often, well, at least I see it in my life, I ask, why do bad things happen in my life? When I'm a Christian, when God is a good God, why do bad things happen? And Job answered that for me. The protection against bad things, when I say bad, I mean the outcome and not the journey, as the outcome is unknown, but the journey is where we think we are doing good or bad. This protection can only happen when we are living surrendered. It's not even a heavy theological subject. It's basic understanding that living surrendered means that we are living and choosing to live under God's authority and choices for our life. And when God's choices happens, how can it include bad outcomes? Do you hear what I'm saying? I can be a child of God. I can live in God's general sovereignty, but my day-to-day action and choices are still mine. And if it's not linked to God, it means that it can include the devil's plans in my life, the devil's devastation. Because God's protection comes in his plan, in his surrender, in his environment. Now, if I choose to not walk in that, who's to blame, me or God? Right? In the same sense, as a Christian, I can still live in God's sovereign authority. Yet choose to use my own approaches on everything. Deals, clients, family, and more. Yet the outcome would be subject to my own choosing. Living surrendered means to A, do what God has called me to do. B, with what God has given me. And C, according to his approach, meaning not contradicting his word. D, surrendering to him. When was the last time you made every decision in your day, and this is a Dion speaking to Dion moment, by laying it down in completely or incomplete surrender, having faith that when the journey does not make sense, in its authority, all things will be good. It's difficult. In the past, I would chase down every sale according to my ability, and often everything looked good just to result in burnout, result in non-payments and bad relationships at the end. The journey made sense, the outcome was different. Yet with every decision that I laid before God and then doing my part in that journey, often resulted in no immediate fruit, but continued to make sense as I proceeded. It's not easy. I know I'm saying this all the time, but it's not an easy thing. We want to do business our way. We want to parent our way. We want to be a spouse our way. Why? Because we see ourselves as situated or kind of like suited because we have Christ. The only protection is in the presence of God, and God's perfected presence is in his plans, not yours. That's where the prosperity scripture comes in, the plans I have for you, not the plans that you have for you or the plans I will reveal to you. The second approach is visions should adapt. And this is a short one. The second approach is one we often forget. We start the year with a vision and we plan and you stick to that, and it's okay to be in the position of I got it wrong. Remember this. This was important for me. My approach for 2026, personally, gonna get this in, is with visions, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to change. Visions change. They should. As a leader, your main role is to create vision and steer the company and teams towards that vision, right? Empowering others along the way with a purpose to create, the purpose to build relationships, and the purpose to serve. When something blocks your vision, your sight often needs to change. You dream too big or too small, you adapt, and even sometimes need to adopt something different. It's okay to have similar visions than others. If your vision was a one-time objective, you would be without a job in your own company in the first year. Your vision for your life, your vision for your company should always include those around you, and your vision should be built on the foundation of surrender. Don't take pride in your vision, take pride in the execution of your vision so that you can change and swap your visions as needed and still make it at the end of the day. The third approach is generally being more vigilant. Listen, guys, people see what you do as the norm. This is, I'd say the last approach is to be more vigilant on how you act, why you act the way you do, and what you act or rather actually react on. People see what you do. I notice this around my team. I notice this around my kids. The things we do subconsciously become habit, and habits form culture. In essence, what we do and how we do it might be motivated by the why, but the why is personal. The why is not always known to others. And often there is not enough time to explain the why. We just do what we do regardless of personally knowing the why, and people pick up on that. Our kids act and react like we do. They approach things similar to what they see mommy and daddy do. And the same goes to our team members and clients. When you want people to thrive and people to act better, you should firstly not contradict your actions against your values. And secondly, when you act out of the norm, take it upon yourself to educate others on the why. Sometimes the why for an out of the norm action will lead to showing you that you are actually wrong, and it will give you the opportunity to teach others why this was actually not okay or what they could do differently. It's a difficult skill to master, the skill of viewing yourself as others do, but it's a vital skill for a leader. The ability to view your actions as possible habits forming and seeing how they can affect and shape your culture or value system. You don't want people to develop habits that you sowed that in essence makes them foreigners to a good value system. In your house and in your workplace, be more vigilant on your approaches and very mindful to understand the why when things are out of the norm. As a hefty tip, remember we do things either as an action, where you have the ability to choose the right approach, or from reaction, where you need to rely on your emotional intelligence and be mindful of the message that it carries to others. Not only be mindful of your personal excuse, right? The next category that personally was something big for me is family. And I guess everyone has this on their agenda, but for us it was even more so of a reality than the usual. You see, when our kids were born in Nelspruit, they were born into existing flows. We had a community, we had family quite literally next door to us. We had our ways of doing things, and for the first part, we understood the reason and the day-to-day agenda. Becoming a parent was new, but our ways of life were built on a strong foundation, even more important to a known foundation. Moving across the country meant, and still means, we need to rebuild not only for ourselves but for our kids, our careers, and our calling in life. To be honest, it's difficult. I guess that's where the mindset of I get to really help me out. Not only as a practical tool, but also in a sense as a coping mechanism. I guess it's definitely worth mentioning a couple of things that worked and maybe some things that did not work. Right, so yes to that. In family, the first thing that I want to address is kids and technology. Because I've said it before in a podcast where we talked about preparing for a future that doesn't exist. Technology is way more valuable. Kids can start coding at a way younger age. And I think the advice from the industrial era psychologists is not valid to what we're approaching and implementing in our kids' lives. I said it before and I said it quite publicly. Tech is not the issue. Tech should be included in schools and included in the household. You can prepare for that future, the future that doesn't exist, or you can prepare for one that does exist. In a digital era with a clear exit on the industrial era, where do you think tech holds a position? It's very difficult to me, or for me to talk about this to clients, to talk about this to parents, to entrepreneurs, simply because I'm no expert. I've got no foundational expertise or knowledge or formal degrees that gives any credibility to my opinions on this. But it is easy for me to have my own opinion and, my own approach to this matter in my own household. And after all, I said that today would be my personal approach to 2025, highlighting how I do things as an entrepreneur or how it affects the surrounding areas of an entrepreneur's life. And my opinion on this is that the experts are wrong. And so are we as parents. In a nutshell, I've found that what works, and honestly, we still fail at it. It's like knowing that in order to run a marathon, you need to train for one. To train for one, you need to know how. But to execute all of that, you need to have the discipline, especially when it's not easy. So this is our training plan. That requires so much discipline, yet personally, I often fail. For us, there are two things we need or personally would like to eliminate from tech's involvement from a tech's point of view, I guess, when it comes to our kids and even to us personally. I'm going to share the 2 points and reasoning and some tips of the ideal. In other words, how we would actually want to do these things. Some things we've tried, some things are working, and some things we just need to be a bit more disciplined, but we can see the fruit when we work on it. The two things that we want to eliminate is, number one is instant gratification, and the second thing is the privacy factor. For me, most problems around tech falls into these two categories. When I grew up, we played outside, and some people say we never watched TV. I think that is a bunch of baloney. We watched TV quite a lot. It was KTV, Power Rangers, Dub TV, Rugrats, you name it. But there was a difference. And the difference was this. It was only on at certain times, and for most cases was on. You either watched it or you didn't. There wasn't like a moment of switching on the TV. What would you like to watch? You switched on the TV and this is showing. That's what you watch. You can choose between channels, but you can't, just choose from an endless list of what to watch. Secondly, kids played outside because grown-ups had conversations. You weren't allowed in the grown-ups conversations area, and not because of, I'm not going to validate or invalidate that. You go now and see everywhere the kids are on the laps, There's a lot to it. I get it. But apart from the kids being on the laps and not playing, apart from that look, feel, the general problem here is between the parents. When I grew up, my parents had conversations, chatted and everything like that. Nowadays, and I'm also guilty, our phones are with us. And so when we talk, we made reference to the screen the whole time, and we constantly reply to messages. I quickly just want to reply to the message. So we're not actively present in that conversation. Kids played because grown-ups had conversations. They weren't stuck behind their phones or check Instagram reels and messages during a braai. The other thing worth mentioning is that tech was always a co-space. It was never a private device. I know this one is hard just because we cannot compare the two simply just because of a small logistics like, I don't know, wired versus wireless phones and tech being designed to be more personal, but here's the gist of it. This is the message. I want my kids to learn from a young age, and it requires me to act in the same way after all. They are very vigilant. I want my kids to understand that, first of all, technology is for development and problem solving and not as a relational substitute, or especially not to fulfill instant gratification. I want my kids to understand that tech is not a privacy toy. I want them to use it for the ecosystem and economical era we live in. I want them to be able to do that, and I want them to be able to use it. Practically, where we saw changes or what we are implementing is the following. First things first, and this is a hard one. TV needs to be gone. Wait for it. Not out of the house, unless you want to, but out of the accessibility for instant gratification purposes. Does this mean our kids do not watch TV? Of course not. TV is actually part of family time. And I think it's great to have it as part of family time. But that's a crucial point. Family time, meaning together, not a tool that separates us. Not you watch what you want and then later I watch what I want. Sport, together. Movie nights, together. Whatever we choose, we are mindful that it is watched when we are together and we choose. We choose, not them. You can give them options like playing the typical this is on and that is on, like when we were kids, but not going to satisfy your instant gratification or on choosing anything that the web has to offer. Let me give you an example on this. I'm personally, deliberately an arse when it comes to this. Intentionally, I'm an arse with this. I do not ask my kids, what do you want to watch? And I deliberately throw, in most cases, I do here and there, I try. I said I try. I do not give the option if you told me in advance that this is an option. I do it with music as well in the car. I do it with when they get to have screen time. So let me give you a practical example. When I say, are we going to watch on TV? Are we going to watch on iPad or what? Are we going to watch them? And they say, yes, I want to watch this. I said, first of all, I said, no, that's not on. Here's your 3 options. And I deliberately do not give them the option. If they didn't start with their option, I would give more options. So most probably they will get that just from a point of instantly wanting it and wanting it. It's not an option. I'll take it away. Then I give obviously the things that we filter and approve, and I give other things as well, like National Geographic. Like, do you want to watch some sharks? Not only animation. Do you want to watch some sport? Do you want to watch the ballet if your kids are into ballet or this or that? I throw a couple of adult options, things of interesting, and you'll be surprised. My kids the other day loved National Geographic. We had friends over whose kids were like very traumatized by this. I'm like, this is nature. It's nothing tremendously weird. It's a shark eating that and a lion catching a gazelle. And I don't know. This is me personally. But I do the same with music. They get in the car, the first thing they want. And we innocent with this. Like, what do you want to listen to? And they this and this and this. Guys, the only thing with tech, privacy and instant gratification, do not let them get to the point where they see, I can tell this device to do something for me and instantly it will do it. Obviously, they'll realize that this is a device is for, but in their human development nature from a young age, you want to limit instant gratification in their life and privacy. And we'll get to the privacy part just now. Then our kids need to be taught that separate to the above, there's a clear ending on when the show stops and no more. We are from the beginning clear. It's 2 episodes or 30 minutes or what. There's not a, can we watch more episodes? It's a typical thing as when we grow up. Well, you can if you come back tomorrow this time because the show is done. You can watch E with Nolene Mohamed, can't remember how to pronounce her name, or you can watch a Tupperware channel, or Nora Jones, or I don't know. No, it wasn't Nora Jones. Which was the other Jones? In any case, back to my point. I'm sidetracking myself here now. Yeah. But more so, they need to witness from a young age that phones are not that private. As a father, I love doing my business, my morning business, scrolling on Instagram. It's my me time, and the kids away from me because of nature's odors blessing, which is a curse to them. I get to break away for a few moments. But taking a phone out of a public space into a personal space like bedrooms and bathrooms sends a message that when they have their own, and it will happen, it is okay. And for boys, man, you are opening up endless opportunities for history clearing just because you showed that a phone is a private space for a girl. Those conversations and flirtations are better controlled in public than in privacy. I do the same with music. I said it before. Just overall, just being more strict. You cannot tell the device, give me this. You cannot expect them to treat it openly when you are hiding away with yours, even if you are working on it. Like you're doing normal things, Instagram, working, whatever you call it. Just don't. Laptops and scrolling out of the bedroom. And when you have family time, purposefully put the phone somewhere else. And when you do use tech and you do have your doom scroll moments, invite them over to watch with you. If it's not kid suited, do it when they go to bed, but include your spouse. The last thing when it comes to the family, and I've been very, very sensitive about this and very mindful, and I almost want to say I perfected it, but I haven't. And guys, the thing we as parents do the most, and we do it with good intentions, is we lie to our kids. Why? Because it's easy. And it comes with tech. It starts with tech. It's like, Peppa Pig went to bed. Peppa Pig is not on today. Peppa Pig this. Or the sweeties is klaar. There's no more sweets and everything like this. Ask my wife. I'm still fanning in it. But purposefully, I said, no more lies. Nothing, not the smallest thing. It's not easy in the beginning. Like, Daddy, can I have a sweet? No, you cannot. Why? Because I said so. Not because it's up or done or finished or closed. It's because there is more. You just not getting more now. No, the iPad is not dead. The battery is not off. I said no more watching. Very, very, very easily we can get out of that conversation with reasoning with a small lie. And it's a valid lie. This is the truth. There is no space for lies. The Bible says the devil is the father of all lies. He gives him that. It's the smallest things of trust issues, and your kids are going to grow up and saying, you lied there, you this there, you this there. And you need to create that open space of complete transparency, complete truth, because in this era specifically, they're going to challenge or get challenged or face so many obstacles in their lives. And you get to be in that position where people come to you, especially your kids, because of how you handle the truth now as a reputable source. We don't do it intentionally. We don't call it a lie. We call it whatever we want. I'm saying stop with it. Be the grown-up. Set the boundaries. Say no. That's enough. And if you feel that you need an explanation, explain. But don't fall on the tribute of, you can't play with my phone because the battery died when the battery is not there. You can't play with my phone because it's my phone and you don't play with the phone. That's the reason. Then, the second thing when it comes to family is husbands need to be the villain sometimes. The other realization that comes to me this year is that sometimes you need to be the villain. For them to be the superheroes, especially from a father's point of view, and especially from a husband's point of view. The reality is, one day in front of God, I doubt that the judgment scale will be linked up to how your friendship was. I honestly don't even think it's going to be a metric. I'm not saying to be a 90s, 1920s stereotype, poople. I'm saying that although you love being their favorite, your role is to be their dad and your role is to be your wife's husband according to God's measurement. Did you lead the household by eliminating idols? Did you lead the household by fear of God? Did you lead the household with my love for them and by understanding that boundaries should be in place? We kid around a lot. I kid around a lot. But a frequent phrase in my household is, I'm your father and I'm not your friend. Fathers or fathership includes friendship. But friendship does not require you to be a father. It means that my no should be my no and my yes should be my yes, in line with how God modeled it, not how men bent it. So every time that I need to be the bad guy, in this reference, the villain, I always align it with, does my actions result in them becoming the superhero or me just enforcing a man-made hierarchy? It's different with sons and daughters. I get that. I see that. I experience that. I don't have the best metric for both. But what I do know from boys' point of view, just because someone else uses an example, but just because I am a man, I know that boys are born with these two puppies. These puppies called lust and rage or anger, or however you want to see that. And I know that these puppies have the capability to turn into wolves. And I know as a father, it's my role to teach my son how to tame those puppies. So with my son and my daughter as the villain, I've got different approaches to disciplining, to discipleship, to teaching, to learning. With my boy, for example, he needs to be a man. He needs to understand that with both my kids, but especially with him, I will never let him beat me in anything. I would always be willing for him to compete with me, and then one day I would need to be fine with him actually achieving that. So with physical play, he's 2 years old. I can't just punch him when he punches me, but I need to allow to recognize that this guy's got rage. He needs to understand how fist fights work, when it's okay, when it's not okay. He needs to understand how to control emotion and rage and anger and all of this stuff. So sometimes when I see he's really getting aggressive with his sister or surroundings, I call him up and I say, listen here, do you want a box? And he looks me in the face and he says, yes, I want a box. Then I apply the 5% added rule. I don't put a time on it. What I do is whatever you throw at me, I'm going to give it back to you in 5% increments. So you decide when enough is enough. And surprisingly, it always works. Surprisingly, he gets to the point where he hits me harder, I add 5%, and he hits me harder and I add 5%. And we get to the point where he says, that's sore. And I said, well, you chose that level. I just added the 5%. With girls, it's slightly different. Obviously, I'm there to protect them, to guard their heart, to be that. I can't teach them that, but they don't struggle with that. And that's why I'm so blessed to have a wife in this position that can guide our daughter into that. But husbands, realize this. Sometimes you need to be the villain in order for them to be the good guy and the superhero at the end of the day. Then, an approach that I took this year, and once again, this me being very vulnerable, is I got upset with no companionship. In a new town, my biggest obstacle this year was not doing things with my wife. As a husband, I really got upset with this. It was a weird feeling. It was a feeling of, am I wrong? Am I that selfish that it's all about what I want? Initially, I thought that, it was birthed from this, from the thought that in this new space, she has got instant community and instant day-to-day agendas from just going to work, where me as an entrepreneur and soloist needs to build this from scratch. And to be honest, I felt like it was a personal unfairness on me. The fact that she gets to do these things with others and I don't get to. But I soon realized that couldn't be it. I'm not craving to do things with others. I'm craving to, get her attention and our time together. Now, hear me out. We need time with other people. Definitely, as well. And I have built, or rather am building hard towards those relationships. So that's not an issue. I'm not sitting here in desperate need or anything like that. Yes, I love people. So if you're in desperate need, reach out. But then I was reminded about Adam. Adam's first attribute that he shared publicly, an attribute of God, was that he wanted Eve. And the purpose of that was so that man is not alone. It's companionship. And as a husband, we crave companionship. Sometimes for the wrong reasons and sometimes in the wrong way. But overall, we, as a man, were created to desire companionship. And God's gift in that companionship was Eve. I realize this might be a sensitive topic for those that do not have someone yet, and this is not to talk about that. But from those who have, I encourage you to be in love with the idea and nurture your agenda so that you do get to have companionship together. Not from a selfish point of view on what I want, but from a purpose-driven point of view. That's a desire I was created with. When you plan your annual agenda, make sure to plan time together. Not only date nights, but life. It's just one of those personal things that affected me this year, and for the life of me, I couldn't pinpoint the reason. Work towards your friendship and companionship daily. Not to exclude others, but to purposefully include one another. And then the final category, of course, is God. The importance of men. I think that's the first thing I want to talk about in under the category of God when it came to my personal perspective, experience, and collective ways of walk in 2025. Stats on men going to church is just two stats this year shook me, but in a very good way. And it's actually not really to my surprise. The first stat that I read is that the Bible remains the most sold book, but more to that, its year-on-year sales went up 3 years consecutively. The second stat is that more men are showing up at church. I remember just a couple of years, 4 or 5 years ago, when we were at church, we would see no men. We just an influx of women, and basically, if a man came to church, he had options, right? And I'm not talking about your one to two men in your local service. I'm talking about drastically more men. Even more men than women are turning to Christ. But what's more is the reason for that is, and I quote, it's to find purpose. And at the same time, mental health illnesses and suicides amongst that same cohort are rapidly decreasing. When in other cohorts, meaning people that men not, going drastically to church or whatever, in those cohorts, it's unfortunately shows the opposite. There's a massive increase on mental health illnesses and suicides. And while scientists and medical professionals are battling it out to find the reason and cure, the evidence speaks for itself. Our purpose was always built on the foundation of our Creator and that rest, which is the number one cure for stress, anxiety, and depression. That rest is true in Christ, a story as old as time. There is peace with God. Now, why is this worth mentioning here today? I want to start with the basics. Men and women find purpose in different genres in life. Yes, each person has two main purposes, or rather each believer has. Everyone has, but if you are not a believer, you won't really fall into the same set of life-pondering questions. The first purpose is purpose in God, meaning for what reason did He make us? And the second or secondly, the purpose is the purpose of myself, or the purpose in myself. For what purpose did he make me? And I want to start with the second question, which all starts with a two-way split, male and female. And without going into the daily sillies of what, who, where, let's just talk about man and woman, okay? And how their purposes are shaped internally regardless of the orientation you choose. And unfortunately, I'm not a woman, so I'm also not a scientist. So excuse the hypocrisy when I am talking only from a man's point of view here, to add to my personal theme of the year. Man has got this purpose to provide. Intentionally, men's purpose always feels valued based on their ability to provide. Provision is very important for men. We were created, called, and cursed to be able to do so. The enemy, on the other hand, uses this type of provision to create chaos. He identifies and creates different reasoning, logic, and explanation or description on this provision. But still, men have the desire to want to provide. Physically, food on the table, protection, but also be a spiritual provider, or in essence fall into priesthood of the home. And we see that now. We see men unable to fulfill purpose outside of church with a natural quench of spiritual thirst, not only for themselves, but to be able to provide that onto others. Is it ironic? No, not at all. I think it's the most beautiful picture we see today, that the calling was always there. But for ages and even generations, we saw a decline in men going to church, absent fathers and husbands, and now we find ourselves in a completely new shift, a restoration shift, a kingdom calling. And why is this massive for me, and why do I even mention it here? What does this have to do with the entrepreneur or lessons that I learned in 2025? The first thing is, first of all, it testifies to a solution that points to Christ. An inner discipline that most men struggle with, always felt ashamed, I guess because of our pride in provision. And now we see it's actually okay to have that foundation of wanting to provide. It's just the hype around the type of provision that needs aligning. And yes, it includes materialistic things, just not to the extent of more than your daily bread. It also gives kind of like hope that kingdom businesses are truly built. Then, when we take on what we do and our calling, we can execute with faith, knowing that God is busy building. Around the topic of God, I wanna get personal with me and personally failing in God's plans to an extent. My personal testimony in all of this, I feel that this year, to a certain degree, I failed in God's plan. The story, however, does end with a cool testimony, I think, at least one to my standards. And the biggest advertised reason why we moved was because of God's calling. And that's 100% true. We shared the testimony plenty of times. And during the move, my personal attention was all but God. It was work, it was family, it was finding that balance, it was getting the rhythm while saying, well, at least we are going to church. Now I'm by no means a theologian, but if there is one thing that I know to be true, is that God does not call us out of something. God calls us onto something, meaning the next. We, and I'm guilty of this, often feel that because of our own overcommitment and burnout, we tend to want to break away by saying God calls us out of the season. And I actually don't find that to be biblically accurate. God does not end seasons, but usually it's not a call out, meaning to stop and focus on your own ambitions. So he does end seasons, but, and here's a but it's a call onto. Meaning after this season, there's the next, meaning out of the current onto something new. And that's why it's called a calling and not an opt-out. I know in my life, God has got a calling for teaching, for speaking, for leadership and preaching, and for so long, I think I got it wrong in thinking it needed to be in a physical church setting. My heart's desire and my gifting to work with entrepreneurs is quite obvious. And it's quite obvious that God is moving me into the space of helping kingdom businesses. And to be honest, although that was the heart behind this year from a theoretical perspective, I don't think I managed to use it from a faith angle. Meaning I trusted myself to get the work in, then only to work in the space with my calling. So it included God's work, but remember that surrender topic? It maybe excluded God's method. And that's what I want to put out today. God's promise and gifting works best in His blueprint. That includes His strategy and His approach, not your approach, by adding Him as a value cell later on. So naturally, there was this burnout and sense of feeling, oh, did I fail God? And although I think in a way I did, I went back to the core as I needed motivation for 2026. I was early for a meeting in Century City. Sitting there with time to spend waiting for investors meeting, I did my usual, ordered a coffee and took out my Bible. Okay, you need some backdrop context here before I continue. 4 years ago, I was asked to preach to young and vulnerable children, right? I was privileged to spend a lot of time with Tsunami, which is one of the best organizations out there, taking care of thousands of vulnerable children, orphans, and mothers in townships and working the gospel into that space. So every time I would go out to give, spiritually, I was just receiving. It's kind of like ironic how God works, right? Anyway, I did a sermon there titled Jesus' Roses. And although there are many interpretations and takeaways depending on the kind of like the recipient's view, the crux of the design was to leave a message of hope. A message designed to teach that the world and happenings that's out of our control might damage who we are, but the beauty is within the design and potential. And when rooted in Christ, we get to see the bloom or the new bloom. So, 4 years ago, back to my meeting 4 years later. I'm busy reading, and as I concluded, I prayed from a point of doubt. My prayer and doubt was very specific. I asked God that I needed encouragement that the work that I do, or the work that we do in general, actually has an impact. I needed this not to doubt God's capabilities, but to reset my compass that is what we do really making an effect. I kid you not, as I ended my prayer, I received a message from one of the CEOs of Tsunami, from Brenda, who, by the way, I don't speak to on a daily basis. And as I got the facts for this message, the last time we spoke was from over a year ago, and it was on the topic of Brenda reaching out saying thank you for me emceeing one of their events, their AGM. But this message, out of the blue, or rather straight from the heavens, read, "Good morning, Dion. How are you? I hope you and your family are doing well." I was going through my affirmations from past Tsunami youth camps. Wait, sorry about that. And I see that there was one for you that is in my envelope for 2022. Maybe it will be an encouragement to you today. This message was sent at 7:45, the minute that I ended my prayer, and 15 minutes before my meeting. Added to the message was a letter from a young girl who was sexually abused, writing to me personally to say that my message changed her life and gave her insight on the next actions to take. And I'm not going to read the letter. It's quite personal and sensitive, but here are the interesting facts. When I told Brenda that she has no idea how much that meant to me, giving her now the backdrop of her timing and the delivery thereof of her message, she said to me that the letter was intended to be given to me in 2022 already. She has no idea how, but she misplaced it and found it 2 weeks earlier, meaning the day that she gave it to me, or the letter 2 weeks before that. So 3 years later, but 2 weeks before the delivery, that's when she found it. But she only remembered to send the message this morning. And how insane is God's timing? A letter that would have been perceived as me doing a great job if read when written. A letter that would have carried emotional feelings of missing the previous space of servitude if received 2 weeks prior. Or a message that answered my prayers and encouraged me to walk surrendered in 2026 when received at this very moment. God's timing is, well, just the best for what we need at the moment. And one of my highlights for 2025 is this, a story that will motivate me for ages to come, and I hope you realize that the work you do today has the capability to ripple impact for ages to come. The last two agendas for today will be a couple of tips that I gave plenty of clients this year. So from a practical point of view, they paid for it, did the research, gave them the tips, and bringing it kind of like for free back to you. 3 practical elements that I believe are soft skills that will amplify your attention in 2026. So, if you're ready for it, we can go straight to that. The first tip is how to be more productive. Productivity is all about understanding distractions and actions. I'm not going to give you an in-depth discussion on this, as in previous episodes we talked about this and habits quite extensively. But what I did want to bring today is the missing in a nutshell moments. That was quite the change maker thought on this topic with my clients and even me personally. I feel that anything you plan for 2026 will not bear fruit, or the ultimate intended fruit, if your aspirations have distractible pitfalls. So avoiding distraction is the key for not living with regret. We actually already know what to do, be it health, family, the balance, time with God, new ventures. We know what to do. But generally, as previously addressed, we lack the habits of how and why. The actual problem is that we get in our own way. Mastering your attention is the number one skill you should master. The best way to understand what distraction is to understand what it is not. The opposite of distraction is not focus, it's traction. Both works being built around the key foundation. The foundation of action, distraction, and action. Reminding us that both are actually because of an action or decision that you make. You choose to take an action leading you away from your goal, checking emails and doom scrolling, or you choose to take an action leading you towards your goal. It's all simply actions that pull us closer to our goals versus actions that pull us away. Therefore, anything you plan to do with your time cannot be wasted time. Thus, traction, right? So, when of course, it's done with intent. Dorothy Parker said this. She said, "The time you plan to waste is not wasted time." The worst kind of distraction is actually the things you label as work-related. Things that I, in any case, would need to do. For example, checking work emails, mid-task within planned traction is the worst kind of distraction. Personally, this is where I love Cal Newport's work on deep work. There are, of course, especially if you speak to addiction experts, triggers that cause the pull towards actions, whether traction or distraction. But here's the interesting part. We tend to blame triggers as external, meaning it's someone else's problem. One of our biggest attribution errors, I guess. But did you know this, that 10% of triggers are caused externally, whereas the other 90% are all internal triggers? The 10% external are the typical things like we like to blame, the cell phone pings and rings. The 90% internal triggers are what is happening inside of us. It's the uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape. Simply put, why we don't do things is because of the 90%, not the 10%. It's because all of the 90% triggers are emotion-regulated problems that need friction, that needs boundaries, and that needs avoidance. And that's the habits you should focus on. All that human behavior is, it's about the desire to escape discomfort. The steps you can start working on is to master your internal triggers, to make time, meaning plan for your tractions, to hold back on external triggers, and to prevent distraction with pacts. Pact is where you put in friction in between things that you purposely need to bypass in order to get there. In 2026, this will be our first masterclass, showing you the 4 elements plus some more. The master is basically to master your productivity planning better. So subscribe to our channels, follow our socials, be involved, because at the end of the day, we research and design, then we test it with our clients so that so that you get a working tested model for self-application. The second thing that I want to bring to you is how to balance out. I said it before, saying it again, there's nothing like work-life balance. Some moments will require more focus on life elements and some more on work. One always comes at the sacrifice of the other one. But the first things first time entrepreneurs, unmarried, no kids, starting out in your 20s, my message to you is this is your time. The only time where you get the opportunity almost freely to put the work scale first. Stop demanding more balance. You need experience. You need the grind. You need the failures. You need to be building the culture, co-creating visions, prove yourself as worth. It's okay to throw it all out there. Later on, it will be frowned upon. Do it now so that you can design what works in your vision plan. Don't throw every hard obstacle out for the sake of playing more paddle. Take them on and learn to master the skills of solutional thinking and overcoming them. That will be your key to balance that you so much desperately required later on. And to the rest, simply put it this way. Picture on the desk. Who are you doing this for and to what extent? Not to what expense. If you are grinding to provide at the cost of never being present, does that not really seem quite right? On the other hand, always being willing to be present to skip the responsibility of building, creating, employing, working, that's also not the accurate so-called balance. You need to be mindful, be careful, but be purposeful. Which brings me to my last point, is to seek your calling, seeking your calling. One of our annual masterclasses, so if you need help joining on this, we do it annually, but also frequently annually. What you need to understand this is purpose is found in your calling, and when you found it, it unleashes the true place of being content. For the entrepreneur, you need to find your purpose in God. Explore why we were made. Then explore why you were made. There are a couple of things that you can join on this. You can join one of our masterclasses. You can join an alpha event if you want more clarity on why you were made, why are you here. But understanding our purpose as humans, meaning why did God create us, should be your number one priority on this journey. And it immediately needs to be followed by, okay, then why me? Why am I created? If you cannot answer those two, any other purpose definition would be subject to external successes and external successes. In high times, you will feel valued, and in low times, and for the entrepreneur, they will follow. The low times, they definitely will. You will end up quite literally feeling depressed. The purposes, best in this order, that needs clarity is: first purpose, the purpose of humans. B, the purpose of me, meaning why am I created? C, the purpose of being a husband or wife. D, the purpose of being a father or mother. Now please note that C and D does not require you to be there already, meaning you don't need to have kids already or have a spouse already. But having that understanding will help you a lot when it comes to those times where others usually have to sacrifice a lot more due to building on a purpose that excluded those possibilities, right? So E, you want to explore and find the purpose of work. What is the purpose of entrepreneurship? F, G is the purpose of servitude. H is the purpose of relationship. I is the purpose of stewardship. And J is the purpose of leadership. Those are a lot. But I've noticed that it's not because of the quantity that we do not explore them, but rather the lack of knowing their existence. We just talk about purpose. And now, there's so many elements. We need to understand your purpose in this. Or our lack of understanding the order, any order. Yours might be different, but purpose is why more than only us. It's understanding our place in everything else. When we understand that, you will soon see that you do have a place in all of this. And because of that, applying your unique you, understanding your values and traits, will reveal to you your calling. And let me tell you a little secret. When living in your calling, I promise you this, nothing else will break away your character or destroy your purpose. And imagine being an entrepreneur with that mindset. You will be indestructible. So, what exactly will 2026 look like for Not Yet Mature and XCAP? At XCAP, we secretly announced to our investors and stakeholders that, now it's publicly, that we have entered the journey to exit at 2030 with a valuation exceeding $1 billion. For long, that has been a dream, but any dream for an entrepreneur has some form of feasibility to it, right? The what if or can you imagine moments becomes a moment of, okay, what would it take? Not generally speaking, but what will it actually take to achieve this? And although we are far from it, there are quite a number of goals and objectives that we identified that, according to us, can make this possible. Although legally I cannot disclose more, why not follow along on the journey right here? And I promise you way more on our socials next year. XCAP, Exemplar Capital, Not Yet Mature. What does it mean for this space? Next year, Not Yet Mature is widening our scope. We will be continuing with this as a show, but giving the entrepreneur and startup much more valuable tools. As for the content creators, especially in podcasting, especially those that are just starting out, please stay tuned to the space. Something magical is coming your way and you do not want to miss out. And if you ever dreamt about starting a podcast, if you ever needed a sign, this is it. A ticket to your voice and your brand success. For more information, reach out, stay tuned. With all of this, we will also be expanding on our entrepreneurial network and knowledge-based systems and access. 2026 will be the year of you, the year where we intentionally serve into your purpose, and it might even include a very cool book launch. Guys, this year has been quite the different one. I won't say ups and downs, but definitely will say something different. Different obstacles, different approaches, different stories, and different clients. And hopefully you can see that, especially from this episode, different personal challenges as well. But together, and especially because of you, we managed. We managed not only to overcome, but managed to be kept accountable, managed to execute on what was entrusted to us, managed to dream bigger than ever before, and managed to start getting into the rhythm of surrender. We learned a lot. We watched hours of content, read so many books and case studies, tried the theory in practice, and humbled ourselves during times of failure. But we managed to grow. Also managed to understood that, like with most here, we are also not yet mature. Thanks for a great year, and this is to you.